Welcome, folks, to our first ever virtual art show here at South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. We're on the Oregon coast. We are located on the southern Oregon coast, south of Coos Bay. South Slough is a 5,000-acre protected area. It's the first National Estuarine Research Reserve in the country, dedicated back in 1974. And we are celebrating this year our 40th anniversary, which is very exciting. And I'm also extremely excited that we have someone here with us today who's agreed to be our first virtual artist. I guess she's not a virtual artist, I can assure you she's right there for real. But Kimberly Wurster is joining us today, and Kimberly's art show is going to kick off our 40th anniversary. So what I want to start out by offering Kimberly is thanks for being a part of this. Yeah, trying this out. We've never done this particular. We've been live before, but never live in this way, doing a virtual art show. So today, because this is the first time through, we don't have a lot of opportunity for interaction with viewers, but we are going to invite somebody into our midst here who is our public involvement coordinator, and it'll take me just a second to send an invite to Deborah. And Deborah Rudd, if you don't know her, is an absolutely fantastic member of our staff who does our public involvement program. And Deborah will be your advocate today. So all of you viewers out there, if you can think about Deborah as the person who might ask the question for you, we can see. I see we've got some people watching through Google+, but hopefully Deborah will join us here and we'll share out her video so that we can see her. But in the meantime, Kimberly, let's dig in. So I have hopes that we can discover a little bit about your background, what got you into creating this lovely artwork, how you do this. So maybe you're giving up a few of your secrets, I don't know. But, and then finally, we'll appreciate some of the work itself and talk about how you created that. So first off, just how did you get started in creating art? What was the motivation for you, and where did you begin this journey?
Oh, it began at the beginning. When I was very small, we lived on a farm in southwestern Montana. I was born in Missoula, Montana, actually.
Oh,
a lot of people really know where that is.
Sure.
It's kind of a destination. And we had lots of different kinds of animals, and my brother raised and trained racehorses. So even though I was fond of the other animals, horses were my favorite. That's always the case with little girls. And so, and nature in general. All of my siblings and myself were always encouraged to look around and to appreciate the beautiful surroundings, because Western Montana is hard to beat. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yes, it is.
And
very different from the Oregon coast, however.
A lot colder.
Yeah.
But when the geese would fly over in the migration, or ducks, or, we were encouraged to go out and make a note. There they go, and happy trails, And so my folks had been ranchers before we moved into town, before my time.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, as a result, a number of really, really good friends out way in the country, way, way out. And we would go on the weekends to go and visit them. And I remember riding in the back seat without any coloring books or toys of any sort. My nose would be glued to the window looking at the beautiful scenery. That was my entertainment.
Sure.
So I appreciated all the things then that I do now. And I always had a pencil in my hand. All of my brother and all of my sisters could draw, and I was the only one who really pursued it. But I was always drawing everything in front of me, and I really, as I mentioned, became fond of the horses. And my brother encouraged me to get it right. The ears, the eyes, all of the tack.
Capturing form became a priority as you thought about the very specific ways that these animals appear, or these plants, the different breeds. Yeah. So how did you get west of Montana? You're on the Oregon coast now. So.
In 1995, my husband and I were living about an hour southwest of Bozeman. And just before we moved down here, I painted my first real bird. It was actually a prairie falcon that I copied off of.
Bird.
Yes, I copied it off of a calendar because I didn't have any of my own reference, and I just wanted to see if I could do it. You know, it's kind of a challenge, of course. And,
sure.
And my brother was getting married, and I wanted to do something really special for him. I mean, he's my brother, of course, I love him, but he's a very good friend of mine, too. And so I was really encouraged with the turnout, and my husband, I had always been encouraged by everybody to do what I was doing, you know, drawing and everything, but never really encouraged to pursue it. And my husband, Scott, looked at that and he said, you might want to do something with this. He has a very, very keen eye, very discriminating eye when it comes to wildlife and art. And he's been out in the woods a lot and very observant. So I trusted his judgment, and he's been unfailingly
I'm glad he had that judgment.
Yeah,
that's me.
Anyway, so we moved down to the Elk River.
Oh,
in 1995,
wonderful.
Just north of Port Orford. And where I had been before, you know, we hadn't had the trees up close to the house. We didn't have the songbirds. And so down on the Elk River, everything was just right here. I mean, to listen to a winter wren or a black-headed grosbeak, I mean, these sounds were new to me. Yeah. And I was missing the symphony. You know, I had actually learned to play the cello and had been a musician for some years. And so the birds kind of filled that void. You know,
and do you know where the estuary for the Elk River is? You know, down near Cape Blanco, right?
It's wonderful.
So that's called a blind estuary. Do you know that? And it becomes blind to the ocean. You probably know that in the summer months. There's just not enough rain there. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah,
very cool. It's a beautiful area.
I'd love a rendering someday, maybe, of a blind estuary.
I actually have some really neat drawings that worked up of that area. I was down there mushroom picking.
Oh, yeah. Well, phenomenal area. So, I want to touch on another aspect of your artistry. You're a musician.
Yes.
So how does your visual art relate to the music that you play?
The first experience I ever had with that was, I don't know how old I was. I was very small when I started listening to classical music, Beethoven, Brahms, Liszt. I was very, very fortunate to get to hear the Missoula Symphony at a very young age, and just hearing them tune just wired me. I have to be part of that, you know. So I learned to play cello and did become part of that.
Lovely instrument.
Very beautiful instrument. And I began playing cello when I was 10. But before then, when I was drawing like mad, before I actually was introduced to playing music, I had all of these action images in my head of cowboys and Indians and broncs, you know, bucking broncs and all of these things. And somehow I ended up just with a block, a painter's block. I couldn't express it. I couldn't get it out on paper. It was very frustrating for me. And somehow, I can't remember who bought it, but a LP recording of Aaron Copland ended up in our house. And I heard Billy the Kid and Rodeo and Appalachian Spring. And I was like, yes, it's my favorite. Oh, I love that piece. And when I heard that music, it was just like the floodgates were opened. It was amazing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all these images started just bubbling out, and that was my first experience. It was really profound. Cool. And I use music to this day for that.
So to me, that's very exciting. You know, when I think of the visual arts, I tend to think, how is that? Where's that motivation coming from? And you hear something sometimes when you're looking at these things. I can't help but when I look at your paintings, I'm hearing that bird. You know, if I see a bird, I kind of hear that in my head. Can we talk a little bit about the process of how you make artwork? Yeah. So,
what I do.
How, you know, when you begin to make a piece of artwork, where is the beginning? Where is this first nugget, this moment when you say this needs to be visual artwork?
That happens in the field.
That
happens when I'm outside. I do paint from reference photos. I take my own reference work. Yes. But there is no substitute for spending time out. And you don't always have to have a camera in hand. I mean, it's handy, obviously, because birds don't hold still and the light changes. So it's a very necessary tool. But there's no substitute for sitting there just soaking it all up. The whole package, the day, the weather, the humidity, everything. And so that's where that starts, that initial inspiration. And I do take, there's no such thing as too much information. I have a lot of images. I have no idea how many. And so I began going through those, and I remember, see, when I'm taking those pictures and we're doing sketches in the field, I'm coming from the same place, no matter what I'm doing, because I'm composing.
Sure.
I'm collecting that work with a purpose in mind, and so the photos are very inspiring for me too. It doesn't have to be a sketch. And so when I begin to go through them and sorting them through, I pick out oftentimes images or components of images from several different pictures. Sometimes 5, 6 pictures will, different photos will have parts of them go into the same painting, and I have to be very careful, of course, to match things like light and season, and make sure the bird would be seen there at that time. I mean, those things are all very critical, because I have a number of clients who will go home and grab their bird book. No pressure. Right. But I would paint it that way anyway, because that's what I want to share with people.
Well, in the work that you do, when I look at it, I recognize that you have this tremendous eye for detail, but you also are able to convey impression. The work isn't simply a realistic rendering, cold, stark. Here's the animal. The beak is exactly the right length, although ultimately it probably is exactly the right length. Yeah, but also lighting, mood, textures. It conveys something that is emotional, really, to me anyway, about the animal or even the scene. So how do you go from I want this to be accurate, but I also want to convey that spirit. Maybe that's the je ne sais quoi. That's the piece that we can't say what it is. But.
I actually start with. It's a very good thing coming from a compositional point of view to use a design-driven idea, okay? Because no picture is going to work unless it has a good design. I don't care how well it's done. It has to have a good design. So with that in mind, my work actually is subject-driven, and I've learned recently to combine the two. In fact, it would be kind of a neat teaching thing for me to pursue, because I've been approached about teaching, and I think that would be a useful thing for a lot of people, because design is really interesting, and I love composition and design, but it has to have that subject in there, because simple shapes won't do it for me. And I have spoken to a lot of artists who are of a like mind. They need some life in there, not just the shapes. And the shapes are fine if that's what you want to do, but it's just not where I'm coming from.
Sure.
So, I don't want to lose my train of thought here, because this is such a loaded issue.
Well, and I'm gonna move your train onto a different track here in a moment. So
but I start with a thumbnail sketch, very small, like 1 to 2 inches, very simple idea, the basic shapes and how they relate to one another, and if it feels good in the pit of my stomach, and basic balance and symmetry and that type of thing. We don't want things too symmetric.
Right.
And I do a tonal study, oftentimes just black and white.
I have to tell you, you showed me one earlier today, and I went, oh, that's right, tonal study. I can't, that's like way back in college, the one art class I think I took or something, so it was nice to see tonal studies
very effective.
A part of, Do you, you brought along a couple of sketchbooks here, and I would love to share with our viewers some of that work, and we brought this little easel out, so when we get comfortable with it here, we can adjust the camera.
That's right.
Yeah, let's, sorry about this, folks. We'll move that down a little bit like that. I think
we'll
we can
ignore
see
this one
well.
up here, because this is a
different study.
Different study. But this little black and white here became the painting behind this study. So, and this is actually quite a lot larger. This developed drawing here is quite a lot larger than I usually do. I usually don't get much larger than this little image up here, maybe a 4x6 or something along that line. But I start oftentimes with a simple line drawing, just to see, as I mentioned, how the shapes will interact on the picture plane, and then do a basic tonal study like this. Sometimes I work it up to 3 to 5 tones. Shades of from white to black. And you had a question. You wanted to answer something. I don't want to lose that question. Go ahead.
Oh man, there is. So a couple of things is I want to talk about investment. In other words, the investment
yes.
you make in the sketch versus the investment made in the painting. But also these tonal studies and the play of light. So light is so critical to the focus, to the interest in the image. So is that you use the tonal studies to start to build your space for the light?
Yes, and the light is you know, they have to have that impact.
Yeah.
The light in the dark. So.
Well, in this, I want to point out, you know, this, even though it's not very detailed at all, I can see you've got the composition already figured in your mind is where are these major components going to live in the overall composition of the image. And that creates interest right there. I mean, even though this is undeveloped, there's some interest instead of, you know, boom, that bird's right in the center. It's not right in the center. It almost looks to me, though, like in the finished composition, maybe you move the bird a little bit. You play around with that.
I do. I play around with that. And when and you mentioned a very good point that would be good to expand on a little bit, the investment of time. As I mentioned, I usually do not spend this amount of time on a drawing. I mean, this is almost complete. And I actually caught myself a couple times with a couple other paintings investing so much time in this drawing that I didn't have anything left for the painting.
You were done, yeah.
You know, and I would encourage everybody, you know, especially the newer artists who maybe are a little less familiar with their own working process just because they haven't done it for very long. Listen to yourself and find what works for yourself. If it works for you to develop fully and then paint it, great. But if it doesn't, you know, you have to find what works best because it really saves a lot of time and frustration and energy. So what I'll do at a point like this is, as I mentioned, oftentimes they're a lot smaller, somewhere between this size and this size, actually probably closer to this size. But and they're not very detailed at that point, but they are to scale. All of the components are where I want them.
Yeah, so, you can see that here.
Yeah, so what I'll do at that point, and even did in this case actually, because the painting is larger, instead of trying to redraw it freehand, because I've already done all the drawing I want to do and I don't want to burn out on that, I will then put it on my flatbed printer, either in one piece depending on the resulting size that I want, or I will even cut it in quarters and blow each quarter up.
Oh, sure.
Okay, I'll just play with it until it's right, and then I'll transfer it with tracing paper to whatever you know, paper or sanded paper, whatever, you know, medium that I'm happening to use. It could be on watercolor paper or sanded paper, canvas. So anyway, then I'll transfer it and all that drawing is done, and I will go into the surface, the support surface, and I will add the details for the bird's eyes and the feet, those feather placements, you know. And I do actually, a point I would like to make specifically about birds. I have an acquaintance who mentioned to me that, and I don't remember the title of the book, but she said she had a book that mentioned all of the numbers of feathers for each bird. That, you know, I thought, oh my gosh, well that's fine, but you know, you need to paint what you're seeing because all of those feathers are not going to show all the time. If the bird's head's turned, you know, you're going to have some separation here, you know, on the back side of the neck. I mean, you just really have to be observant and not paint what you think you should see. You have to watch that.
What's really there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a critical point, I think.
And, you know, before we're going to jump to the painting here in a moment, but one of the things that we talked about a little bit is with a piece of artwork, there is a point where maybe you want to say, I'm done. And with the sketch, you've talked about that a little bit, is there's the investment that you make in that sketch. If you had some advice, I'm going to sort of jump ahead to advice for the artists. There may be some artists out there or some folks who would like to try. What would you recommend that it seems like they would start with a sketchbook and just start to sketch what you really see. But then, you know, what would you recommend for them? Where is that jumping point to say, okay, back off now and work on your painting? You know?
To answer that, I'm going to back up just a hair and point out the fact that I will take this, usually they're on the same page as these two images are. I will have it somewhere in my studio so that it is present as I'm painting. You know, I have my reference work, my photographs and stuff that I work from, which are critical. But I want this to be in the back of my mind as I'm painting so that I remember that initial inspiration, because I want to, getting a final result that looks like you want it to look. Yes, I want this to look like a bush tit, not a hawk. Okay, that's a very good thing to have it look right, but you want it to feel right, and there is a difference there.
Sure.
And that might take some practice. It did for me to zero in on that and be able to find that place, how you want it to feel. And so having this present, you know, I don't have to be looking right at it, but it's kind of in my peripheral vision. And I'm very much aware of how I want this to feel. And so when I reach that 3/4 point or wherever, when I have all of those basic shapes in, I have my edges where I want them. Edge control is great for creating depth and believability, and tonal values for 3-dimensionality, you know, is wonderful. So
I have to stop you here for a second. You tell me you have no formal training, and yet you have such a sophisticated lexicon of describing this artwork. I can tell this is your life, or at least a part of your life, because you're a talented musician as well. But you know, it's just fascinating to me anyway. That, you know, you've found something that clearly it's what drives this beautiful artwork that you make, but you've got a very sophisticated level for someone who has no formal training. You read a lot.
I read a lot. I have a small, but very, very high quality library. I have a keen sense for what works for me. When I see somebody's teaching method that works for me, you know, I nail it. I get that book right away before it, you know, might go out of print or something, and I refer back to things. That's a very good point that I would like to make, because based on whatever I've been painting, if I go back to an article or a book that I read in, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, I'm gonna glean new information possibly from that article or that book, because now I have experience that will enable me to finally understand what that artist was trying to convey. So you know, basic good instruction doesn't change. Because, you know, and so I am very fond of going back to the basics. With my cello, I always go back to the Bach suites when I need to ground myself and work on things. I always go back to Bach, and it's kind of the same way with my paintings. And I reach that 3/4 point, though. Knowing when to finish is almost an art form in itself, because I reach a point where all of those major players are in there. And I don't have anything obvious that I want to put in. And by the way, if it doesn't need to be in your painting, leave it out, because simpler is better. You have more impact. I do a lot of simplification with my work. But I start looking and feeling my way, creeping forward, because I would much rather stop short of my supposed finish line than to overwork something.
Than to overwork,
I don't care what the medium is, you know, and some are less forgiving than others, like watercolor. You can always pretty much tell if somebody's gone in and tried to. That's very, very difficult. It can be done, but it's difficult. So I would rather stop short and just say, as they always say in the books and other interviews, you know, to say what you have to say and leave it at that. That's a very, very good bit of advice.
Let's turn to the beautiful finished artwork. So we're going to readjust this just a little bit so people can see the faces again. And a beautiful piece that we've got here that you saw the study of. But where did this come from? What moment did this come from?
Well, this is a bush tit, and they usually travel around in large groups of very gregarious birds. I refer to that as a bird party. They're very, very difficult to photograph because they're moving constantly, very, very quickly. And so I was down the Elk River, and this little bird landed right in front of me, and this is very, very unusual. I happened to have a camera in hand. That never happens. Right. They know. I'm sure they know. But anyway, he landed right in front of me, and it was such a treat because they're such dear little birds, and it just sounds like they're having such fun. And I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I shut it.
It almost looks like the bush tit had a camera too. And just take a picture of you taking a picture of,
he was looking at you.
That's right.
But it was really a lot of fun to paint this because, as you pointed out, this is, you called it a big leaf maple that we have here. And the leaf really is that big, and the bird really is that small. I actually had somebody ask me that one time. But this was a lot of fun to paint because you'll see you have lost edges in here. You know that continues up past the bird and in there. But it kind of, that's a very good thing to include in your painting if you can, and it adds a certain amount of mystery, and it's very satisfying to look at work that doesn't have everything explained, you don't need to explain everything because the viewer's eye can fill certain things in.
Absolutely. So, and you know, one of the things that struck me about this piece, of course, it's the light. I mean, the light draws your eye right to the bird. And this little bird is having this moment for me where it's staring back at me and letting me know I am fully aware of you. Whatever you do next, I will know, and I am a lot faster than you are.
Out of here.
So yeah, so I could be out of here, but I'm going to give you this moment with me. But it also, the leaf itself, the way that you captured that big leaf maple has this texture, this tonal quality that tells me exactly what season this is. I can hear this leaf. If I were to, you know, find that on the ground and pick it up, I can hear the sound of it crinkling, and I could, you know, crack it apart. So nice there. And then the detail down here. How do you decide? Yeah, I want to add that in. That's a nice little accent piece on that branch, or you know, I mean, so you put a little bud or a little daub of green there. Was that just to create, sort of broaden the palette a little bit, or? Well,
I want this to continue out as it naturally would, but I don't want the eye to continue out. So you'll notice softened edges here along the very edge of the painting, and a little something to bring your eye back, you know, and bring you back to the bird. And you'll notice I've put in various bits of, you know, leaf, and I can't quite see.
Well, this looks like salmonberry because these are thorns here, and so I don't want to touch them because they come off in your fingers.
So I'm stopping the eye from going off, but also this is a good point. I'm glad you brought this up because you can. I was looking at a piece the other day. I was going through my sketchbook, in fact, looking for items that we might use for this. And there was a drawing that I had done of some geese on a pond, and I had put a goose over on the far edge, and I had developed it. It was really a great pose, and I could see the line drawn down the painting, and I cut it off because my eye kept going over to that goose,
pulling you away from,
pulling me away from the focal point. So if I were to develop these further over here and make these edges sharper, it's amazing what an edge can do. You know, then the eye would be drawn out of the painting and on to the next one. That's not something we want.
Right.
So that's a good point. I'm glad you asked that. And what were you going to say?
Well, I'm looking at the time, and we're getting darn close, and we agreed to a half-an-hour presentation, but I feel like, gosh, now we could have gone on longer. But I do want to show a couple of other pieces of your work, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So let's.
I can take this, and you can get them sent there.
All right. And then, so here, let's see if we can get this set up properly, and bring the camera up a little bit. There. So, if you want to talk just for a quick minute about this, and then we're going to give folks some information. But
this is a red-shouldered hawk.
Yes.
You've probably seen them around.
Yeah, absolutely, and heard them.
Overhead.
Yeah, usually I hear them first.
We have a one or two pair living on our property where we live in Coquille, and I just love to listen to them. This particular bird, this is the same bird. And I noticed that you captured very nicely. I mean, you can tell from these three different, I call them studies, but that this is the same bird, same shape to the head, the eye, the beak, everything. Well, I got fairly close to him because he was preoccupied with things on the pond beneath him. And you'll see the wet feathers on his belly here. He was actually diving. Well, he wasn't diving. He was swooping down to the water. They don't dive. But anyway, he missed a couple times and flew back to his perch. But he looks like he's going to try again, though. Well, the idea of sneaking up on a bird is very funny, no matter what kind of bird it is. Yeah. Especially a hawk. But because he was preoccupied with dinner plans, I was able to get fairly close. And these were really enjoyable to paint, all of them. This was very, very all done freehand. No pencil marks under there. It was it took me a long time to paint this. This particular pose here, however, I have to admit, was my favorite because of the eye. Yeah. I can just get lost in his eye. Yeah. And actually, this is an acrylic, for those of you who are wondering about the medium. Okay. The one that we had up here first, I failed to mention that the one we had up here first, the little bush tip, was a pastel. This one is an acrylic painted on crescent watercolor board, and I have thinned it down quite a lot with medium and water because I want it to go on the surface like a watercolor. I want that translucency.
Nice.
And I really had a lot of fun with this, and I will do more. But yeah, this was a very challenging piece of work.
Very good.
So.
We're going to pull up one more here, and then we've got some information. Okay. You may recognize this one. We'll bring it up a little bit closer. But this is one of my favorite all-time birds.
Me too.
Yeah, this little character, we get to hear it in the woods out here at South Slough. And if you come out and you take a walk, although those of you who are a long ways away, you may have to make quite a trip to get here. But this is the Pacific Wren, renamed. It was the Winter Wren. Yeah,
I still call it the
Winter Wren.
I
do too. I do too.
Yeah.
Beautiful, complex song. And I wanted to, I mentioned the idea of coming out here for a hike, but people could come out here Saturday if they are in the area, and we have an opening of your show from 1 to 3 p.m. Is that right?
1 to 3.
Here at the Interpretive Center. It's always a good time to meet the artist, a good time to see the rest of Kimberly's work, or at least what she's, yeah, I was going to say some of it.
I've got 21 or 22 pieces hanging in the gallery.
So yeah, some phenomenal work. I want to mention a couple of other things in closing. As part of our 40th anniversary, we are kicking off 40 days on Facebook to honor the 40 years that South Slough has been in existence. So I'll turn that a little bit. And so if you visit our Facebook page and you like us, you will not only learn some interesting things about South Slough's history, but you'll also collect a letter each day, which adds up to a very special message, and that special message can earn you something. And I'm not going to say exactly what that is. It's probably not a new Buick, but it's equally as nice. So please visit us on Facebook or visit southsloughEstuary.org. And I'm going to try here at the end of the broadcast to share Kimberly's website, but if this is unsuccessful, let me tell you, it's her name, www, well, that's not your name, but www.kimberlywurster.com.
Right.
And they can see more of your work there, and they can get in touch with you if they have questions.
Yes.
So
feel free to contact me.
All right. Well, I'm going to give that a shot over here with Kimberly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being willing to do this. And if you know anybody who didn't get a chance to see the interview today, please look it up on YouTube. It will be on my channel, Tom Gaskell's channel, but we'll figure out a way to make it South Slough's channel at some point. And yeah, so that's it for our first virtual art show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
fun.
Kimberly. Yeah, great stuff.
Thank you.
All right. So here we'll try a screen share, and we'll go there, and then we'll go there.
There we go.
And in theory, our viewers now are seeing that. So.
It's my homepage.
All right.
All right.
So thanks again for coming, and from South Slough, we're off the air with the Fern and Feather Art Show.
Very much.
All right.
All right.